This lesson, we're going to be looking at powers and roots. So pause the video and have a go at the starter task. Okay, and here are the answers. So the naughty words for today is to be able to calculate powers of numbers. So before we go into that, let's talk about the terminology of powers and roots, okay? So terminology is just a fancy word for what we call things or the names of things, okay? So let's start with the number on the left. Well, we've got a big 3 and a little 2. And in maths, we would call this 3 squared, okay? And if we look at the number on the right, it's like a V shape that puts a little roof over the number 4, and we would call that the square root of 4. Okay, but what do all these little symbols mean, okay? Well, for the first one, we've got a big 3 and a little 2. The big 3 we call the base number, and the little 2 we call that the power. So actually, if you wanted to be very technical, you call this number 3 to the power of 2. And what the power does, it tells you how many times you multiply that number by itself. So in this case, we would do 3 times 3, 3 times itself twice. Now the square root of 4, that symbol that puts a little roof over the 4, we call that the square root symbol, okay? And square root numbers are sort of opposites of each other, okay? But we'll look into that a little bit later, okay? So 3 squared, what does that mean? Well, like we said earlier, technically we should call this 3 to the power of 2, okay? Because the little 2 tells us that we need to multiply 3 by itself twice. And that would just be 3 times 3. So 3 squared is the same as 3 times 3, and 3 squared is equal to 9. Okay? Now what about the square root of 4? Well, this is a little bit more tricky to calculate because there is a way to do this properly, but it's very, very advanced maths. So what we're trying to find is something that when multiplied by itself will equal 4, okay? So we need two numbers, we need two of the same number that when multiplied by itself will give 4, okay? Now, there is a very technical way of working this out, but we're not going to do that. So with these numbers, we have to use a little bit of trial and error, okay? So 4 is quite a small number. So I might start with what's 1 times 1? Well, I know that 1 times 1 is obviously 1, okay? So that can't be right. But what about 2? Well, 2 times 2 is 4. Perfect. We've had a number, we've multiplied it by itself, and we've got 4. So that means that the square root of 4 is equal to 2. Okay, perfect. So now we need to solve these questions, okay? So we've got 4 squared. Well, 4 squared, 4 to the power of 2. So all that means I need to do 4 times 4. And I know that 4 times 4 is 16. So 4 squared is equal to 16. What about 7 squared? Well, it's 7 to the power of 2. So I need to do 7 times 7. And I know that 7 times 7 is 49. And that's it. 7 squared is 49. Now, what about this? The square root of 36. Now, there isn't really an easy way to work this out, okay? So we're going to have to do a little bit of trial and error. So let's start with a sort of big number, okay? Let's not start with 4 because we know that 4 times 4 is 16. So let's try 5. 5 times 5. That is equal to 25. We're not quite at 36, but we're getting close. So let's try another number. Let's try 6 times 6. Well, that is 36. And would you look at that? We have found a number that when times by itself gives us 36. So I know the square root of 36 is 6. Now what about the second one? I need to find the square root of 25. Well, would you look at that? We already figured out what two numbers multiplied together to get 25, and it's 5. So the square root of 25 is 5. So to start off with, you may not know immediately what the square roots of numbers are. But through trial and error, just like this, you shouldn't need to do too many numbers, because you should have a rough idea of what numbers multiplied together give you. You should be able to work any square root of a number out. It might take you a while, but you will get there eventually. Let's have a look at the main task. So here is your main task. So first of all, you need to find the first 15 square numbers. You need to square the first 15 numbers. Then you need to find the square root of these 4 numbers here. And then it's a challenge question. I want you to find the first 5 cubic numbers, okay? So if something is to the power of 3, we call that a cube. We call that cubed, okay? So 1 cubed, 2 cubed, 3 cubed, etc., okay? And just at the bottom there, you've got a hint saying that 2 cubed is the same as 2 times itself 3 times. So 2 times 2 times 2, okay? So you're going to try and find the first 5 cubic numbers. Okay, so pause the video and have a go with this. Best of luck. And here are the answers. Very well done if you got those all right. Now let's have a look at the checking question. So you've got 2 checking questions here, okay? So first of all, what is 2 to the power of 7? And what is square root of 64? But we've got a little 3 above it, okay? So this is technically called the cube root, okay? And what you're trying to find with this, you're trying to find 3 numbers, you're trying to find the same number that when multiplied by itself 3 times will give you 64, okay? Have a go with these 2 questions and give them a go, okay? Best of luck. Okay, so what is 2 to the power of 7? Well, hopefully you figured out that 2 to the power of 7 is just 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, okay? So it's 2 times itself 7 times, okay? So if we go through this step by step, okay? So 2 is just 2. Then 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 times 2, 16. 2 times 16, 32. 2 times 32, 64. 64 times 2 is 128. Okay, so I've just times 2 by 2 7 times. I've got 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, then 128. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 128. So 2 to the power of 7 is 128. Okay. What about this question? What is the cube root of 64? Well, again, you might have had to do a little bit of trial and error with this one, but the answer was on the main task, but hopefully you didn't have a sneaky look at that. Let's try some numbers. We've got 3. Let's try 3 first. 3 times 3 times 3. What is 3 times 3 times 3? Well, 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 times 3 is 27. So 3 is not the cube root of 64, okay? So it can't be 3. What about 4? 4 times 4 times 4 is equal to, let's think about it, 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times 4 is 64. Hey, would you look at that? We found the number that when you times it by itself 3 times, gives you 64. So that means the cube root of 64 is equal to 4. Okay? So good work, guys. Thank you for watching the lesson, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.